The plain of Troy burned under the setting sun. The wind died, and even the vultures waited in silence. Amidst chaos, the golden armor lay still. It was not a god who wore it. It was Patroclus. Then, a howl tore through the air. Hector, your name is now a death sentence.
Thetis emerged from the night foam. Her immortal heart broke. Her son had chosen his end.
Fate was sealed in bronze. This is the story of one who traded life for eternal glory. Of the warrior who loved as fiercely as he killed. The fury that set the world on fire. Prepare for the legend. This is the story of Achilles.
There was a time when the gods walked among men, a time when fate was not a metaphor, but a certainty engraved in bronze. A time when being born the son of a divinity did not mean blessing, but condemnation. And in that time, on the rocky shores of Phthia, where the Aegean Sea breaks against the cliffs with eternal fury, a child was born whose cry made Olympus tremble. Thetis held him in her immortal arms and knew in that very instant that she had lost him. Because the Moirai had already woven his thread, and it was short, terribly short. Thetis was a Nereid, daughter of the ancient sea god Nereus, and her beauty had ignited the desire of the most powerful. Zeus himself had coveted her. Poseidon had emerged from the depths to claim her. But then came the prophecy. Themis, the titaness of divine justice, pronounced the words that would change everything. The son of Thetis would be more powerful than his father, more powerful than any god who dared sire him. And Olympus trembled. Zeus remembered how he himself had overthrown his father Cronus. He remembered how Cronus had castrated and dethroned Uranus. The chain of divine parricides could not continue. The decision was unanimous. Thetis must marry a mortal. Her son would be powerful, yes, but mortal, vulnerable, destined to die. The chosen one was Peleus, king of the Myrmidons in Phthia. A nobleman, brave, who had sailed with the Argonauts in search of the Golden Fleece, but Thetis did not accept her fate with submission. When Peleus tried to take her, she transformed, first into fire that scorched, then into water that slipped through his fingers, then into terrible creatures that tried to tear him apart. But Peleus, warned by the centaur, Chiron, did not let her go. He held her in his arms through each metamorphosis, each attempt at escape, until finally she yielded. The wedding was celebrated on Mount Pelion. All the gods were invited, all except one. Eris, the goddess of discord, was deliberately excluded, and she would not forget the affront. Years later, her revenge would take the form of a golden apple and unleash the most devastating war the ancient world would ever know. But that would come later. When Achilles was born, Thetis gazed upon his small mortal body, and her immortal heart broke. She could not accept it. She would not accept that her son would know death. Every night while Peleus slept, she took the child and anointed him with ambrosia, the food of the gods. Then she placed him on the embers of the hearth, letting the fire consume the mortal parts of his body. One night, Peleus awoke. He saw his son among the flames and acted on instinct. He tore the child from Thetis's hands with violence, without understanding the ritual she was performing. The small Achilles' foot was left charred, and Thetis, furious at the interruption, at the incomprehension of that mortal who had ruined her only attempt to save her son, abandoned the palace. She returned to the sea from which she had come, but she never stopped watching. She never stopped loving. Other versions tell a different story. They say Thetis carried the newborn to the waters of the Styx, the river that separates the world of the living from the realm of the dead. The waters of the Styx conferred invulnerability upon whoever immersed themselves in them. Thetis held her son by the heel and submerged him completely, every part of his body touched by those dark waters became impenetrable, every part except one. The heel by which she held him remained dry, vulnerable. And so, the most powerful warrior the world would ever know would carry a hidden weakness, a point where death could reach him. Whatever the truth, the result was the same. Achilles grew up knowing that his time was limited. That glory would be his only form of immortality. Peleus knew he could not raise that extraordinary child alone. He needed a master who would be equal to his destiny, and there was only one in all of Hellas capable of forming heroes. Chiron, the immortal centaur, inhabited the slopes of Mount Pelion. Unlike others of his kind, known for their violence and excess, Chiron was wise, compassionate, versed in all the arts. He had educated Jason before his voyage in search of the fleece. He had instructed Asclepius in the secrets of medicine. Now he would receive Achilles, and with him would come another child, Patroclus. Patroclus was the son of Menetius, a noble of Olympus. As a small child, he had committed a terrible act. During a game of dice, a dispute with another child had ended in tragedy. Patroclus, in a fit of childish fury, had killed his playmate. The homicide, though accidental, demanded exile. Menetius brought his son before Peleus, seeking refuge and purification. Peleus took him in, and so the involuntary killer and the son of the goddess met. No one could imagine then what they would become to each other. No one could foresee that their fates would remain intertwined until death and beyond. In the caves of Mount Pelion, under Chiron's tutelage, the two children grew up together. The centaur fed them with marrow and entrails of wild creatures to strengthen their bodies. He taught them the art of hunting, the handling of lance and sword, the secrets of healing herbs. The muse Calliope instructed them in song and music. Achilles learned to play the lyre with a skill that rivaled his ability for war. But it was in combat where his talent proved supernatural. He was faster than any other. His feet seemed not to touch the ground when he ran. That is why they would call him the swift-footed. Patroclus never reached his level. He was a competent warrior, nothing more. But where Achilles was fire, Patroclus was the calm that contained him. Where Achilles was pride, Patroclus was temperance. They complemented each other in a way that only the gods could have designed, or perhaps the Moirai in their cruel wisdom. It was during those years when Achilles received the visit that would define his existence. Some say it was his mother Thetis who revealed it to him. Others claim it was the prophet Calchas. The message was the same. Achilles had to choose. He could live a long life, peaceful, full of years, but empty of deeds. He would die an old man in his bed, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and his name would be lost with the wind. Or he could choose glory, go to Troy, fight in the war that was coming. His name would resound throughout eternity. Poets would sing his deeds, but he would die young. He would never return home. He would never know old age. The choice that no mortal should face was placed before him. And Achilles, with the arrogance of youth, with the fire of one who believes that immortality of name is worth more than immortality of body, chose glory. Thetis wept in the depths of the sea. Her son had signed his own sentence, but she would not surrender so easily. When heralds began to travel through Hellas, summoning warriors for the expedition against Troy, Thetis acted. She took Achilles to the island of Scyros, to the palace of King Lycomedes. There she dressed him in women's clothing and hid him among the king's daughters. They called him Pyrrha for his reddish hair. For 9 years, Achilles lived in disguise, hidden from his destiny. But war could not wait. Helen had been abducted by Paris. The Greek kings had sworn to defend Menelaus's marriage, and the seer Calchas had pronounced another prophecy. Troy would not fall without Achilles. Odysseus, the most cunning of the Greeks, was sent to find him. He arrived at Scyros disguised as a merchant, bearing gifts for the princesses, jewels, fine fabrics, perfumes. But among the gifts, there was also a sword and a shield. Odysseus sounded a war horn simulating an attack. The maidens fled in terror, all except one. Achilles took up the weapons instinctively. His true nature was revealed. The disguise had ended. Destiny claimed him. Before departing, he lay with Didamia, one of Lycomedes' daughters. She would give him a son, Neoptolemus, who would also fight at Troy years later. Achilles would never know him. The Greek fleet gathered at Aulis, more than 1,000 ships, the most powerful kings of Hellas, Agamemnon of Mycenae, the supreme commander, Menelaus of Sparta, the wronged husband, Odysseus of Ithaca, the one of 1,000 stratagems, Ajax of Salamis, the greatest after Achilles, Diomedes of Argos, favorite of Athena, and Achilles, at the head of 50 black ships transporting the Myrmidons, the fiercest warriors of Thessaly. Thetis appeared before departure. She gave her son the armor that the gods had gifted to Peleus on the day of his wedding, an armor forged by Hephaestus himself, and she gave him one last warning. An oracle had revealed that if Achilles killed a son of Apollo, his own death would come shortly after. She assigned him a slave whose only mission was to remind him of this prophecy. Achilles departed carrying the warning. But war has its own logic, and oracles are fulfilled precisely when we try to avoid them. The fleet made a navigation error. Instead of Troy, they landed in Mysia. King Telephus came out to confront them, believing they were invaders. Achilles wounded him severely. In the thigh, the wound would not heal. Years later, Telephus would seek out Achilles, begging for a cure, for the oracle had said that only he who wounded him could heal him. The rust from Achilles' spear, applied to the wound, would finally cure him. In exchange, Telephus would guide the Greeks to Troy. Everything was connected. Everything was part of the implacable weave of fate. When they finally sighted the shores of Troy, the Greeks faced a problem. A prophecy stated that the first to set foot on Trojan land would die. No king wanted to be first. The ships remained anchored while the warriors looked at each other. Then Achilles jumped, or so it seemed. In reality, Achilles first threw his shield onto the sand and stepped on it, technically touching his own shield before the Trojan earth. It was Protesilaus who truly stepped first on the ground, and he died that same day at the hands of Hector. The prophecy was fulfilled. The war had begun. For 9 years, the Greeks besieged Troy without being able to take it. The walls built by the gods, Poseidon and Apollo, resisted every assault. Hector, the crown prince, organized the defense with brilliance. But outside the walls, in the allied cities of Troy, Achilles sowed terror. He conquered 12 cities by sea and 11 by land. He sacked Thebe of Mysia, where he killed King Eetion, father of Andromache, Hector's wife. He captured Chryseis and Briseis, 2 women who would unleash the crisis that nearly destroyed the Greek army. And at some point during those years, he committed the act that would seal his fate. Troilus was the youngest son of Priam, king of Troy. Some whispered that he was actually a son of Apollo. He was young, barely, a teenager famous for his beauty. A prophecy stated that if Troilus reached the age of 20, Troy would be invincible. Achilles found him outside the walls near the fountain where he watered his mounts. He pursued him to the temple of Apollo where Troilus sought refuge. But Achilles did not respect the sanctity of the precinct. He entered the temple and killed him there upon the altar of the god. He had killed a son of Apollo on sacred territory of Apollo. His mother's warning echoed too late. The god of the silver bow had seen everything. And gods, do not forget, the 10th year of war brought the crisis that Homer immortalized. It all began with a plague. Apollo, furious because Agamemnon was holding Chryseis, daughter of one of his priests, sent arrows of pestilence upon the Greek camp. Men were dying by the hundreds. Calchas revealed the cause, but only after Achilles guaranteed him protection. Agamemnon had to return Chryseis. The King of Kings agreed, but his pride demanded compensation. If he lost his war prize, he would take another's, and he chose Briseis, the slave of Achilles. It was an error that nearly cost him the war. Achilles was not a man who tolerated affronts. When Agamemnon's heralds came to his tent to take Briseis, the son of Peleus was about to draw his sword and kill the supreme king. Only the intervention of Athena, invisible to all except him, stopped him. The goddess took hold of his golden hair and whispered that patience would bring greater rewards than immediate violence. Achilles sheathed his sword, but he pronounced a terrible oath. He would no longer fight for the Greeks. He would withdraw to his tent with his myrmidons, and when the Trojans were massacring the Achaeans, when the ships were burning, then Agamemnon would understand what he had lost. And so it was. Without Achilles, the Greek army began to crumble. Hector, taking advantage of the absence of the only warrior who could match him, launched a devastating offensive. The Trojans broke through the Greek defenses. They reached the ships. Torches began to fly. Fire licked the keels of the boats that were their only hope of return. Agamemnon sent ambassadors to Achilles. Odysseus, Ajax, Phoenix, the elderly mentor who had raised him. They offered him the return of Briseis, immense treasures, even the hand of one of Agamemnon's daughters in marriage. Achilles rejected them all. His wrath was deeper than any material compensation. He had been dishonored publicly, and honor for a Greek hero was worth more than life. If this story is gripping you, subscribe now and turn on the bell. Here each narrative is a journey through the myths that shaped civilizations, and what comes next in the story of Achilles will tear your heart apart. Patroclus watched the massacre from Achilles' tent. He could bear it no longer. The men with whom he had fought for 9 years were dying while they remained inactive. Finally, he knelt before Achilles with a plea. If the son of Peleus would not fight, at least let him do so. Let him borrow his armor, the legendary armor forged by the gods. The Trojans would mistake him for Achilles. Terror would do the rest. Achilles agreed, but with one condition. Patroclus must limit himself to driving the Trojans back from the ships. He must not pursue them to the walls of Troy. He must not face Hector. "I swear it," said Patroclus. It was a promise he could not keep. When Patroclus appeared on the battlefield, wearing Achilles' armor, the effect was immediate. The Trojans believed that the son of Peleus had returned. Panic spread through their ranks. Patroclus seized the moment. He killed dozens, then hundreds. Success intoxicated him. He forgot Achilles' warning. He forgot his promise. He pursued the Trojans to the very walls of Troy. 3 times he attempted to scale the walls. 3 times Apollo pushed him back with his own divine hands. The 3rd time, the gods spoke to him with a terrible voice. "Fall back, Patroclus. It is not your destiny to take this city, not even Achilles', who is far better than you." But it was too late to fall back. Apollo descended among the dust of battle, invisible to mortals. He positioned himself behind Patroclus and struck. The helmet flew from his head. The breastplate came loose from his body. The spear broke in his hands. Stunned, disarmed, Patroclus was left exposed. First Euphorbus wounded him with a spear in the back. Then came Hector. The Prince of Troy drove his spear into Patroclus's belly. Achilles' companion fell to his knees. Hector leaned over him to hear his last words. "Do not boast too much," said Patroclus with blood filling his mouth. "A god and a mortal struck me down first. You were barely the 3rd. And hear this, Hector. Your death approaches. Achilles will kill you beside these very walls." Hector stripped the body of Achilles' armor and dressed himself in it. The Greeks fought fiercely to recover the corpse. Ajax the Great carried the body on his shoulders while Menelaus and others held back the Trojans. They managed to bring it back to the camp, but the armor was lost, and Achilles did not yet know. Antilochus, son of Nestor, was charged with bearing the news. He found Achilles seated before his tent, gazing at the sea. Before the words left Antilochus's mouth, Achilles knew. Something inside him broke before hearing the confirmation. Patroclus is dead. Hector killed him. He has your armor. What came next remains engraved in the memory of all who witnessed it. Achilles collapsed. He took dust and ash and poured them over his head. He tore at his hair. His scream crossed the camp, reached the sea, descended to the depths where Thetis dwelled. The goddess emerged immediately. She found her son writhing in pain on the ground, surrounded by slaves, women who feared he would take his own life. "Mother," said Achilles when he could speak, "Patroclus is dead, and while I lived I could not protect him." Thetis embraced him. She knew what would come. She knew any comfort would be useless. "Listen to me, son," she said. "If you seek vengeance, if you kill Hector, your own death will come immediately after." Achilles looked at her with eyes that no longer belonged to the world of the living. "Then I shall die. I shall die right now if necessary, because I could not save my companion. I was not there when he needed me. It serves no purpose that I live if I cannot avenge his death." Thetis did not try to dissuade him. She knew her son. She knew the inevitability of fate. Instead, she made a promise. She would bring him new armor at dawn, an armor worthy of his final battle. She ascended to Olympus that same night. She went to the workshops of Hephaestus, the smith god, who owed her a favor from centuries past. Thetis had cared for him when his own mother Hera threw him from Olympus because of his ugliness. Now she would collect that debt. Hephaestus worked all night. He created an armor that no mortal had ever worn before. The shield was a masterpiece that contained the entire universe. On its surface shone the earth, the sky, the sea, the sun, the moon, the constellations. 2 cities were depicted, one at peace and one at war. Fields of tillage, vineyards, herds of animals, dances and festivities. Everything that life offered, everything that Achilles was about to abandon, was engraved on that shield. The breastplate was lighter than a feather, but more resistant than any wall. The helmet had a golden crest that looked like a flame in the wind. When Thetis deposited the armor before Achilles, the Myrmidons could not even look at it directly. Its radiance was blinding, but Achilles took it without hesitation. His eyes burned with a fire that terrified more than the armor itself. Before the battle, Achilles made peace with Agamemnon publicly. The king of Mycenae returned Briseis along with oaths that he had never touched her. He offered the promised treasures, but none of it mattered to Achilles anymore. Briseis could stay or leave. The treasures could rot. Only one thing occupied his mind: Hector. He had to die. He had to pay. And afterward, Achilles could finally rest. What followed was a massacre without precedent. Achilles hurled himself against the Trojans like a god of death descended among mortals. He killed without pause, without mercy, without the slightest hesitation. Bodies piled before him. The river Scamander filled with corpses until its waters overflowed. The river god himself, furious, rose against Achilles, trying to drown him. But Hephaestus sent fire to contain the waters. The gods themselves began to fight among themselves, divided between Trojans and Greeks. The cosmos was tottering, and at the center of it all, Achilles kept advancing, seeking one single face among the multitude. Hector knew he was being sought. Priam, his elderly father, begged him from the walls not to go out to face him. Hecuba, his mother, showed him the breast that had nursed him, pleading with him to think of her. Andromache, his wife, wept, clutching their small son, Astyanax. But Hector could not hide. He was the defender of Troy. He had worn the armor of the enemy. He had killed Patroclus. He knew what awaited him, and yet when he saw Achilles approaching, when he saw the fire in his eyes and the radiance of that divine armor, terror seized him. He fled. Achilles pursued him. 3 times they circled the walls of Troy while both armies watched. 3 times Hector sought the gates to take refuge, and 3 times Achilles cut off his path. The gods watched. Zeus held his golden scales. He placed upon them the lots of both warriors. Hector's pan descended toward Hades. His fate was sealed. Athena then descended. She took the form of Deiphobus, Hector's brother, and approached the Trojan prince, pretending to have come to help him. With the presence of the one he believed to be his ally, Hector regained his courage. He stopped. He faced Achilles. "I am willing to make a pact," he told him. "If I kill you, I will return your body to your people for proper funerals. Swear that you will do the same." Achilles looked at him with contempt that could have frozen the sea. There are no pacts between man and beasts, between the warrior and one who killed his companion. One of us will sate the god of war with blood. He hurled his spear. Hector dodged it. The Trojan threw his own. It struck Achilles' shield without penetrating it. Hector turned to ask Deiphobus for another spear, but Deiphobus had vanished. He had never really been there. Hector understood then the deception of the gods. He understood that he was going to die. He drew his sword. If he was going to fall, he would fall fighting. He launched himself against Achilles. The son of Peleus knew every crack in the armor Hector wore. It was his own after all. He knew exactly where it was vulnerable. His spear found the space between the neck and shoulder, where the collarbones separate. The point pierced Hector's throat without cutting the windpipe. The prince of Troy fell in the dust, still able to speak. "I beg you by your soul," he gasped, "by your parents, do not let the dogs devour my body beside the Greek ships. Accept the ransom my father will offer you. Return me to my people." Achilles leaned over him. His words were distilled poison. "Not even if they offered me your weight in gold would I accept. Not even if Priam begged me on his knees. Dogs and vultures will devour you. That is what you deserve for what you did to Patroclus." Hector looked him in the eyes one last time. "I know you well. You are made of iron. But remember my words. You will die soon. Paris and Apollo will kill you beside the Scaean gates. The prophecy of a dying man carries weight. Achilles knew it, but he did not care. Hector exhaled his last breath. His soul descended to Hades, lamenting his lost youth, his truncated vigor. What Achilles did next horrifies even in the context of a war. He pierced Hector's ankles with straps. He tied the body to his chariot, and he dragged it around the walls of Troy, while Priam, Hecuba, Andromache, and all the Trojan people watched from above. The screams of horror and pain reached to the heavens. For days, Achilles repeated the ritual. Each morning, he dragged the corpse around Patroclus's tomb. Each night, he left it lying in the dust beside his tent. But the gods protected Hector's body. Apollo covered it with his golden aegis, preventing it from decaying or being mutilated by the dogs. Finally, Zeus intervened. He sent Thetis with a message for her son. He must accept the ransom for Hector's body. The gods were outraged by his behavior. Achilles, for the first time since Patroclus's death, seemed to awaken from his fury. He accepted the divine conditions. That same night, guided by Hermes, the elderly king Priam crossed the Greek camp undetected. He entered Achilles' tent, and he knelt before him. He kissed the hands that had killed so many of his sons. "Remember your own father," said Priam. "He too is old. He too awaits the return of his son. But at least he has hope of seeing you again. I have lost that hope. I've seen my sons die, the best of Troy, and I have nothing left. But I have come here. I have done what no other mortal has done. I have kissed the hands of the killer of my sons. Have pity on me." The words penetrated something Achilles believed dead. He remembered Peleus, whom he would never see again. He remembered Patroclus. Tears began to fall. Both wept together, the victor and the vanquished, the young man who would soon die and the old man who had lost everything. When the tears were spent, Achilles helped Priam rise. He invited him to dine. He promised a truce of 11 days for Hector's funeral, and he delivered his son's body to him, washed and anointed with oils, wrapped in precious robes. Priam returned to Troy with his burden. The Trojans celebrated their champion's funeral with all the pomp he deserved. For 9 days they gathered firewood. On the 10th they burned the body. On the 11th they raised the tomb. And thus ends the Iliad, with the funeral of Hector, tamer of steeds. But Achilles' story did not end there. The days that followed brought new enemies, new battles, new deaths. Penthesilea, queen of the Amazons, arrived with her warriors to help Troy. She was the daughter of Ares, fierce in combat, feared by Greeks and Trojans alike. She wreaked havoc in the Achaean ranks, until she faced Achilles. The spear of the son of Peleus pierced her body and that of her mount with a single blow. When Achilles removed her helmet and saw her face, he was paralyzed. She was beautiful. They say he fell in love with her at the very moment of killing her. Thersites, a Greek soldier famous for his ugliness and venomous tongue, mocked Achilles for weeping over the corpse of an enemy. Achilles killed him with a single blow. He had to purify himself afterward for the homicide, but he showed no remorse. Then came Memnon, king of the Ethiopians, son of the goddess Eos, the dawn. He was a warrior comparable to Achilles himself. He wore armor forged by Hephaestus, like that of the son of Peleus. He killed Antilochus, son of Nestor, the same one who had brought Achilles the news of Patroclus' death. Antilochus had been Achilles' closest companion after Patroclus. His death ignited the hero's fury once more. The duel between Achilles and Memnon was terrible. 2 sons of goddesses, 2 divine armors, 2 warriors without equal. In the end, Achilles' sword found its mark. Memnon fell. His mother Eos descended from the sky to collect his body, her tears becoming the morning dew. Achilles, maddened by victory, pursued the fleeing Trojans to the walls. He was about to enter the city. Troy would have fallen that day if the gods had not intervened. Apollo had not forgotten the murder of Troilus in his temple. He had not forgotten decades of profanations. He descended from Olympus. He positioned himself beside Paris, the Trojan prince who had started the war by abducting Helen. He guided his hand. He guided the arrow. Achilles felt the impact in his heel, the only vulnerable point on his body. The poison began to spread immediately. He fell to his knees beside the Scaean gates, exactly as Hector had prophesied. The Greeks rushed en masse to protect his body. Ajax carried the corpse on his shoulders, just as he had done with Patroclus. Odysseus held back the Trojans. They managed to bring him back to camp. Thetis emerged from the sea with the Nereids, her sisters. The lament they raised was heard throughout the known world. The Muses themselves descended from Olympus to sing the funeral dirge. For 17 days, they mourned the hero. On the 18th, they burned his body. His ashes were mixed with those of Patroclus in a golden urn forged by Hephaestus. The 2 companions were united in death as they had been in life. The Greeks celebrated funeral games in his honor. Races, wrestling, throwing events. The most valuable prizes were Achilles' weapons, the divine armor that Hephaestus had forged. 2 warriors claimed them: Ajax for having rescued the body, Odysseus for having held back the Trojans. The judges, or perhaps Trojan prisoners interrogated, awarded the weapons to Odysseus. Ajax went mad with fury. He planned to kill Odysseus and the other Achaean chiefs, but Athena deceived him. In his madness, Ajax massacred a herd of animals, believing they were his enemies. When he regained his senses and understood what he had done, the shame was unbearable. He let himself fall upon the sword that Hector had given him years before, after an inconclusive duel between them. Another hero lost because of Achilles, even after death. The Greeks could not, and take Troy by force. They needed deception, the famous stratagem of Odysseus with the wooden artifact. But that is another story. What matters is that Achilles did not live to see the fall of the city for which he had sacrificed everything. He did not live to see his son, Neoptolemus, who arrived from Scyros to fight in his place. He did not live to return to Phthia, to embrace his father Peleus, to know the old age he had rejected. They say his ghost appeared to the Greeks before they departed from Troy. He demanded a sacrifice. Polyxena, the youngest of Priam's daughters, had to be immolated upon his tomb. Some say Achilles had loved her, that he had been killed precisely while negotiating his marriage to her. Others say he simply wanted one last offering of royal blood. Whatever the reason, Neoptolemus carried out the order. He cut the princess's throat upon his father's tomb. The Greeks could finally set sail. In the Odyssey, when Odysseus descends to Hades, he encounters the ghost of Achilles. The king of Ithaca tries to console him. He tells him that he rules over the dead as he ruled over the living, that he is honored among the shades as he was honored among men. Achilles' response is devastating. Do not try to console me about death. I would rather be a hired laborer in the service of the poorest man than reign over all the dead. The words resound through the centuries. The hero who chose glory over life, who sacrificed everything for the immortality of his name, laments his decision in the eternity of shadows. But there is another version. Thetis, they say, gathered her son's ashes and took them to the White Island in the Black Sea. There, far from the world of mortals, Achilles achieved a form of immortality. His spirit inhabits that island, along with that of Patroclus. Sailors who pass nearby claim to hear the clashing of weapons, the cries of combat, as if the two warriors continued training together for battles that will never come. They say Helen, after the fall of Troy, was also taken there, and that Achilles took her as his wife in death, finally obtaining the woman for whom the entire war had been waged. The echo of his name crosses the millennia. Alexander the Great visited his tomb before conquering Asia, honoring him as the greatest of all warriors. The Romans venerated him, medieval poets sang of him, Renaissance artists painted him. Philosophers still debate the meaning of his choice. The Greeks understood something we have forgotten. Immortality is not in the flesh, but in the memory of those who remain. Achilles chose a brief life, but an eternal one. And every time someone pronounces his name, every time someone tells his story, every time someone reflects on the price of glory and the weight of fate, he lives again. He was the swiftest of all mortals, the most beautiful, the most terrible in battle. He loved with an intensity that destroyed and healed in equal measure. He hated with the fury of the gods. He forgave when forgiveness seemed impossible. He died young, as he always knew he would die. But his name, his story, his legend endure when the walls of Troy are dust, when the kingdoms of Hellas are memories, when the very gods have been forgotten. The swift-footed one never stopped running. He only changed paths. This was the story of Achilles, the son of Thetis and Peleus, the slayer of Hector, the hero who chose glory instead of life, the man who paid with his own existence the price of eternity. If this story touched you, write in the comments. I too would choose glory.